I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I found out while holding a paper plate of macaroni salad standing between the lemonade table and a cooler full of beer. It was June, hot enough that the plastic forks bent when you tried to scoop potato salad. My aunt had just put on a Garth Brooks playlist and someone's toddler was crying near the bounce house. It was my cousin Sarah who said it. She'd just walked over from the grill, flipping her hair out of her face with one hand, a hot dog in the other. "So," she said cheerfully, "are you flying out for Lily's big day, or just driving in?" I blinked. "What big day?" She laughed, thinking I was being sarcastic. "The wedding's silly. She's finally marrying that guy with the hair gel. Ryan." "Right?" I smiled like I knew exactly what she meant. "Oh, yeah, right." Then I excused myself to go check on the deviled eggs, which was code for sitting in my car with the AC on high and trying to breathe through the strange, sudden silence in my chest. Lily was my baby sister. I helped raise her after Dad died. I held her hair back when she got sick at her first college party and wired her money more than once when she forgot rent was due. I was the one who mailed her a weighted blanket during her first panic attacks and the one who stayed on the phone with her the night she thought Ryan was cheating. And now she was marrying him with floral arrangements and a venue and apparently a guest list that didn't include me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to decide if I was hurt, angry, or just tired. The answer was yes to all three. Inside the house, someone had cut into the blueberry sheet cake. From the window, I could see Sarah chatting with my mother, who wore her usual soft blue summer dress and looked perfectly composed, as if everything in the world was just the way it ought to be. I looked at the plate in my hand. The macaroni was sweating in the heat. They'd planned a wedding my sister didn't even mention, and somehow I was the only one who looked surprised. I waited 2 days before I called my mother. It wasn't because I needed time to calm down. I wasn't angry exactly. I wasn't even looking for an apology. I think I just needed to hear her say it out loud that they'd planned all of it without me. She picked up on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she said in that warm, efficient voice she used with store clerks and church volunteers. I could picture her in the kitchen wiping down the counter with a dish towel phone nestled between her cheek and shoulder. "Everything all right? I just have a quick question," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Is Lily getting married?" A pause. A breath, the sound of a refrigerator closing. "Well," she said as if I'd asked whether the mail had arrived. "Yes, next month actually. We didn't know if you'd be free." "I didn't know it was happening." She chuckled lightly. "Oh, Esme, don't be dramatic." That word, again dramatic. It was the same tone she used when I cried at Dad's funeral and she told me to pull myself together. The same one she used when I called her in tears after losing my job 5 years ago. "Don't catastrophize, sweetheart. You'll land on your feet." I let the silence settle between us. "You know," she continued, "Lily really wanted something small. Just family." "I am family." She sighed. "Yes, but you're always traveling and these things get complicated. Ryan's parents had a lot of input and there were limited spots. You understand I didn't, but I knew better than to say that." "You're not mad, are you?" she asked, suddenly softer. "I'm not sure what I am." Another silence, this one heavier. Then we thought it would be easier this way, less pressure on everyone. Easier. That was the word. It wasn't that they forgot me. It's that I was the easy one to erase. I told her I had to get back to work, though I wasn't working that day. She said, "All right, sweetheart." And just like that, we hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I opened my calendar, scrolled to next month, and looked at the weekend of the wedding. Nothing scheduled, no RSVP, no seat. I didn't slam doors or post anything online. I didn't call Lily to demand an explanation or draft a long, sad message no one would answer. Instead, I bought a ticket to Alaska. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers, not my neighbor who usually brought in my mail when I was gone. Not even my friend Emily, who had stood beside me through 2 breakups and a layoff and knew my coffee order better than the barista. I just stopped answering things. That Friday, I submitted a vacation request to HR, packed a small suitcase, and left a single sticky note on my fridge. Gone. Don't wait up. The flight from Seattle to Anchorage was quiet. I didn't watch a movie. I didn't read. I stared at the flight map on the tiny seatback screen, a glowing white line arcing over Canada like a scar. By sunrise, I was standing in a rental cabin carved into a hillside of spruce trees, half covered in moss and silence. The lake outside looked frozen, even though it wasn't. The windows fogged over in the morning. The shower smelled faintly of cedar. I loved it immediately. For 24 hours, I didn't check my phone. The second day, I took a walk down to the edge of the lake. There was a wooden bench half buried in snow, and I sat there until I couldn't feel my hands. I took a photo. It wasn't perfect. I wasn't smiling, just a figure in a wool coat sitting by still water under a white sky. No caption, no tag, just the image. I posted it to my Instagram story. Within 10 minutes, the scene list lit up. Lily. My cousin Sarah, my mother. No one said a word. I didn't expect them to. That wasn't the point. The point was that they saw me. Not at the bridal shower, not at the rehearsal dinner, not at the wedding planning brunch I hadn't even heard about, but here in a country of glaciers and silence. I had become momentarily visible. I posted nothing the next day, just lived. I drank bitter coffee from a ceramic mug and watched the fog roll in over the lake. I wrote in my journal, nothing poetic, just lists of things I didn't have to do here. No small talk, no pretending I was fine, no RSVP, no gift registry, only me and the sound of ice shifting in the wind. I knew the wedding was that weekend, though no one had said the date out loud to me. I figured it out the same way you learn most things your family doesn't want you to know from social media inside comments. My cousin Kate had posted a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking underside a caption that read, "Love is in the air," and someone else tagged a boutique hotel 2 hours outside Denver. That was enough. Saturday morning in Alaska was silver and quiet. I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and watched the light creep slowly across the lake. There were no church bells here, no wedding playlists or bridesmaids laughing behind closed doors. Just snow stillness. I made oatmeal. I didn't check my phone. By late afternoon, the wedding had likely started. Maybe Lily was walking down the aisle in something lace and sleeveless. Our mother crying on cue. I imagined soft lighting pastel flowers filtered joy, and somewhere in the photos there would be a missing chair. Not obviously. They'd have filled the seat or rearranged the row, but I knew where I was supposed to be and I wasn't there. That night, I posted a new image. It was just my hand holding a ceramic cup against the backdrop of the frozen lake. The sky was lavender, my nail polish chipped slightly on one finger. Nothing glamorous, nothing posed, no caption. Again, the scene list rolled in within minutes. Lily, our mother. 2 of her friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Still, no one messaged. Still nothing was said. But this time, I could feel it. The quiet had shifted. It was no longer absence. It was presence withheld. I imagined them scrolling through their phones between dances or desserts, seeing my post in a moment of pause and wondering if it meant something. It did. It meant I knew. It meant I was watching not out of jealousy or malice, but because I had once mattered here. And now, I didn't. Not enough to be invited, but enough to haunt the edge of the frame. I didn't post again for 2 days. Let them notice the silence. Let them fill it with whatever story they needed to tell themselves. I had nothing to add. 3 days after the wedding, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was barely 6 in the morning, and outside, the sky was a pale gray. The kind of color that made you forget the sun ever existed. The phone kept buzzing messages, missed calls, more messages. At first, I thought maybe someone had died, but the names on the screen told a different story. Jessica, Aunt Linda. My mother, then Lily's college roommate, then finally Emily, the only one who ever really told me the truth. Her message was short. No greeting, no build-up. You need to see this. She attached a link, a TikTok no context, just a thumbnail of what looked like a reception hall and something blurry flying through the air. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it. I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but I clicked. The video started mid-chaos, shouting gasps movement. A bridesmaid was screaming not in joy, but fury, her voice cracking as she threw a bouquet across the room, not in ceremony, but in rage. People were standing, turning, backing away. Someone knocked over a centerpiece. Glass shattered somewhere off-screen. Then the camera found Lily. She was crying, not delicate tears, but shaking red-faced mascara running. She was yelling something, though the audio was distorted. The voice that came next was clearer. "You were my best friend, Lily, my maid of honor, and you were sleeping with him the whole time." The voice belonged to Hannah, her best friend since freshman year. The same girl who helped plan the bachelorette trip. The same girl who apparently had planned on marrying Ryan herself. My stomach dropped. Another guest's voice, this one half laughing in disbelief, said, "That's the maid of honor." The camera panned just enough to catch Ryan frozen between them hands, raised like a man trying to tame wild animals. He said something no one caught. It didn't matter. The crowd had already started to move guests, whispering, grabbing coats, gathering purses. One woman walked out with her napkin still in her hand. The video ended with Lily sinking to the floor. I watched it twice. Then I turned my phone over and stared at the ceiling of my cabin. The wood beams creaked in the cold. Somewhere outside, a bird made a sound I couldn't name. The buzzing started again. Voicemails missed calls, new texts piling on top of the old. No one said the words, but they didn't have to. "Please call me. Your sister's a mess. We need you home. Esme, please." By noon, I had a voicemail from my mother, her voice wobbling in and out like a radio signal from another life. In it, she said, Lily wasn't eating, that the family was embarrassed that people were talking. She didn't mention me being right. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "We don't know what to do without you." I sat at the window, bare feet pressed to the cold floor, watching the lake ripple under wind. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Hannah. Not a call, just a message. "I'm sorry you weren't there. You probably would have stopped me." She was wrong. I wouldn't have stopped her. I would have let the truth find its way in, just like I did. By early afternoon, my phone had stopped ringing and started pleading. The voicemails were no longer brisk or annoyed. They were softer now. My mother left 6 of them in under 3 hours, each one a little more afraid than the last. In the third, she was crying or trying to. Her voice cracked in places it never used to. "Esme," she whispered. "Your sister is devastated. I don't think she's left her room since Saturday. We don't know what to say to her. We need you home. You've always been the strong one, the one who holds everyone together." That line again, the strong one. The one who knew how to carry things, who never asked to be carried. I didn't respond. Instead, I boiled water for tea and stepped outside, letting the steam warm my face while the wind cut through my sleeves. The sky above me was endless, low-hung quiet. I took a photo of the horizon faint pink light resting on the edge of a glacier and posted it without a word. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "She's not well." "She keeps asking for you." "Esme, please, just 5 minutes." That one was from my father's sister, a woman who once told me after Dad died that older daughters are like extra mothers. I was 15. I watched the snow drift across the porch step and said nothing. That evening, a message came in from Lily herself. Not a call, just a text. "I know I hurt you. I didn't think it would matter this much. I thought you didn't want to be part of things anymore. Please, I need you." I don't know who else to ask. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I didn't believe it, but because it was the first real thing she'd said to me in years. But it wasn't enough. Not after all the times she had taken my help, but not my presence. Not after letting me fade out of the family photo without asking if I was still standing there. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. And now that everything was falling apart, they wanted the scaffolding back. But I wasn't made of steel anymore. I had become glacier cold, still unmovable. It was almost midnight when the phone rang again. This time I picked up, not out of forgiveness, not because I'd softened. I just didn't want the silence to say everything for me. "Esme," my mother breathed like she'd been holding her voice for hours. I didn't speak. She waited, then filled the space the way she always did, with explanation disguised as care. "She's not doing well," she said quietly. "Lily, she barely eats. She doesn't come downstairs. She keeps asking if you've responded." I could hear the clink of something ceramic in the background. Her kitchen, most likely. Probably the same blue teacup she always used when she needed to appear gentler. "I wish you were here," she added. I looked out the window of my cabin. Outside, the lake had turned to glass. The sky was low and endless, the kind of cold that made sound feel smaller. I said finally for years. "You just didn't see me." There was a pause. Not defensive, not quick, just still. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said, her voice thinner now. "You never said, no one asked." She let out a breath, not quite a sigh, just the sound of realizing there's no script left that still works. "I'm sorry," she said, but it came out like a question. I didn't answer. Somewhere in the silence she understood because for once she didn't try to fix it. No excuses, no soft rewrites of history. Just the sound of her breath, the faint chime of a clock in the background, the quiet of two people realizing something had ended a long time ago. And this was just the echo. "Are you coming home?" she asked after a while. I looked around the room, the wooden floor, the wool blanket on the chair, the sound of wind against the windows. Everything simple. Everything mine. "No," I said gently. "I think I'm finally home." We didn't say goodbye. We just let the call fade. I sat there a while listening to the quiet. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't comfort me either. It just felt true. The next morning I woke early. The cabin was still the kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything from you. I wrapped myself in a thick sweater and stepped onto the back deck. The lake below was smooth as glass, reflecting the pale gold of a rising sun. The sky stretched wide and empty, and for once that emptiness felt like peace. I made tea, scribbled a few lines in my journal, then pulled out the thick stationery I'd brought from home but never used. I wrote one letter short, plain, no accusations, no lists of what had been done or left undone, just this. "I hope you find peace. I hope you tell the truth. I hope next time the invitation comes before the apology. Esme." I signed it with my full name, folded it carefully, addressed it to the house I grew up in. No return address. I walked into town later that day and dropped it in a red postbox near a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and smoke. The man behind the counter nodded as I passed, recognizing me from the morning before. "Cold today," he said. I smiled. "Not as much as yesterday." On the way back, I stopped by the edge of the lake. A single bench faced the water. I sat for a while sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching the steam rise and disappear. My phone was still in my pocket untouched. When I returned to the cabin, I posted one last photo. A chair wooden empty, framed by snow. Beyond it, the lake. No caption, but I knew they'd see it. Not because they followed me, but because people always notice what's missing once it's too quiet for too long. That night, I didn't check messages, didn't scroll, didn't wonder what they were saying back home. Instead, I made soup, lit a candle, pulled a blanket across my lap, and read the same page of a book 3 times. Not because I was distracted, but because I wasn't in a hurry to leave the quiet. There was no victory in this, just clarity, no closure, just space. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I just felt still. Esme learns the profound lesson that her worth is not defined by her family's acknowledgement or inclusion. Excluded from her sister Lily's wedding, she initially feels erased her role as the dependable sibling overlooked. Her retreat to Alaska becomes a journey of self-reclamation where silence and solitude reveal her strength lies in her own presence, not in others' validation. She realizes she has been the strong one for too long, carrying her family's burdens without reciprocation. The chaos of the wedding revealed through a TikTok video underscores that their need for her emerges only in crisis, not in genuine connection. Esme's choice to remain in Alaska to embrace the stillness and write a letter without expectation of response signifies her acceptance of her own value. She learns to prioritize her peace over familial obligation, understanding that love and loyalty must be mutual. By letting the silence speak, she frees herself from the cycle of being needed yet unseen, finding home not in a place or family, but in her own unshakable sense of self. This clarity, not closure, becomes her liberation, affirming that she is enough as she is.
The reception hall at Riverside Gardens wasn't the Four Seasons ballroom Mom had envisioned for her daughter's wedding. The venue was elegant but modest. White linens, simple centerpieces, a DJ instead of a live orchestra. For a woman who'd spent 2 years planning what she called the social event of our family's lifetime, the reality of my wedding reception was apparently a profound disappointment. "I can't believe this is what we're settling for," Mom said loudly enough for the guests at 3 nearby tables to hear. She was addressing my Aunt Carol, but her voice carried across the reception hall. "After everything we've invested in Sarah's education and career prospects, this is how she chooses to celebrate her marriage?" I was sitting at the head table with my new husband Michael, trying to enjoy what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture that had become familiar over the past 6 months of wedding planning battles. "Linda, it's a lovely reception," Aunt Carol said diplomatically, though she kept glancing around the room as if confirming her assessment. "Lovely." Mom's voice rose with indignation. "Carol, look around. Sarah could have had the ballroom at the Marriott, a 5-course dinner, a string quartet. Instead, we're in a community center eating chicken that probably came from a catering truck." The guests at the surrounding tables were trying to pretend they couldn't hear, but the conversation was becoming impossible to ignore. "And the guest list," Dad chimed in, shaking his head sadly. "Sarah invited her graduate school classmates and work colleagues instead of focusing on family friends and business connections. This reception should have been networking opportunities for her future career." I took a sip of champagne and tried to focus on Michael's quiet conversation with his best man about their upcoming honeymoon plans. "We're embarrassed to be associated with this wedding," Mom announced to what felt like the entire reception hall. "Sarah has a PhD in international relations from Columbia University. She could have married someone from a prominent political family, someone who would advance her career prospects." Dad nodded gravely. "Instead, she marries a high school teacher and throws a budget reception in a community center. It's like she's deliberately sabotaging her potential." The words hit me like cold water. Michael's hand tightened around mine, and I could see the hurt in his eyes despite his attempt to maintain composure. "Mom," I said quietly, "this is my wedding day." "Exactly," she replied. "Your wedding day should reflect your accomplishments and social standing. This reflects someone who's settling for mediocrity." My cousin Jennifer, seated at the family table, tried to change the subject. "Sarah's dress is beautiful. She looks radiant." "The dress is fine," Mom said dismissively, "but Sarah could have worn her grandmother's pearls, the ones that have been in our family for 4 generations. Instead, she's wearing simple earrings she probably bought online." I touched the pearl earrings Michael had given me for our first anniversary. Modest but meaningful, chosen because he knew I preferred understated jewelry. "And the venue," Dad continued, warming to the criticism. "Sarah works for the State Department. She should have connections who could have arranged something more prestigious. Instead, we're celebrating in the same hall where the community holds bake sales." Michael finally spoke up. "Mr. Anderson, Sarah chose this venue because it's where we had our first dance. It's meaningful to us." "Meaningful doesn't advance careers, Michael," Dad replied. "Sarah needs to think strategically about her public image." Mom nodded emphatically. "Exactly. Sarah's colleagues from the State Department are here tonight. What must they think about her judgment and priorities?" I looked around the reception hall at the faces I cared about most. Michael's family, my graduate school friends, colleagues from work who had become genuine friends. Everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time except for my parents, who were treating my wedding like a failed business networking event. "The cake," Mom continued, apparently not finished with her public critique. "Sarah chose a simple 3-layer cake from a local bakery instead of something from one of the city's premier wedding cake designers." "It's delicious," Aunt Carol said, taking another bite. "It's adequate," Mom corrected. "Sarah's wedding cake should have been extraordinary. This entire reception should have been extraordinary." My phone, tucked in the small purse beside my chair, buzzed quietly. I glanced at it, a text from someone listed only as NC duty officer. I ignored it. "Look at Jennifer's wedding last year," Dad said, gesturing toward my cousin. "Country club venue, 200 guests, live music, 5-course dinner. That's how you celebrate a marriage when you understand the importance of social positioning." "Jennifer's wedding was lovely," I said, "but this is our wedding. Michael and I wanted something intimate and personal. Personal doesn't build professional networks, Mom said. Sarah, you're 31 years old. You should understand by now that every social event is an opportunity to advance your career and establish your status. My phone buzzed again. This time I glanced more carefully. Urgent. Presidential briefing moved to 8 p.m. I frowned. That didn't make sense. I wasn't scheduled for any briefings this weekend and certainly not on my wedding day. And honestly, Mom continued, I don't understand why Sarah is working for the government anyway. With her credentials, she could be working for a consulting firm making 3 times her current salary. Government work is noble, Michael said defensively. Government work is a waste of talent, Dad replied. Sarah spends her days writing policy memos that probably get filed away and forgotten. She could be working for corporations or think tanks where her analysis would actually influence decision makers. My phone buzzed a third time. I discreetly checked the message. Dr. Anderson, please confirm availability for emergency NSC briefing at 8 p.m. Presidential directive requires your immediate participation. That got my attention. The National Security Council didn't make mistakes about personnel availability, especially for presidential directives. Excuse me, I said quietly to Michael, I need to make a quick phone call. Sarah, Mom said sharply, you're not taking work calls during your wedding reception. It's probably just a colleague congratulating us, I said standing up. I'll be right back. I walked toward the reception hall's lobby, dialing the number for the NSC duty office. This is Dr. Anderson, I said when someone answered. I received urgent messages about a briefing tonight. Dr. Anderson, the voice was crisp and professional. Thank you for responding. We have a developing situation in Eastern Europe that requires immediate analysis from our Russia specialists. The President has requested a full briefing by 8 p.m. I'm at my wedding reception, I said quietly. We understand and we apologize for the timing. However, this is classified as a national security priority. We've arranged for secure transportation to bring you to the White House immediately. I looked back through the doorway at the reception hall, where Mom was still holding court about the inadequacies of my wedding choices. How long will the briefing last? Approximately 2 hours. We can have you back to your reception by 10 p.m. if you prefer, though most emergency NSC briefings run longer. I thought about the situation. Mom and Dad were already disappointed in everything about my wedding. Leaving for a work emergency would probably confirm their worst assumptions about my career priorities. I'll be there, I said. Where should I meet the transportation? A motorcade will arrive at Riverside Gardens in 15 minutes. Look for Special Agent Martinez. She'll escort you to the secure vehicle. A motorcade? Standard protocol for emergency NSC briefings involving classified intelligence. Dr. Anderson, please pack any personal items you might need. This briefing could extend beyond the initial 2-hour estimate. I returned to the reception hall and approached Michael at the head table. Michael, I said quietly, I have to leave for about 2 hours. Work emergency. His face fell. Sarah, it's our wedding day. I know and I'm sorry. It's a national security situation. I'll be back as quickly as possible. Sarah, Mom said, having overheard our conversation, you are not leaving your wedding reception for work. It's an emergency briefing. I don't have a choice. Of course you have a choice, Dad said. You choose to prioritize a government job that clearly doesn't respect appropriate boundaries. Before I could respond, the reception hall doors opened and 3 people in dark suits entered. They moved with the unmistakable precision of federal security personnel, scanning the room professionally before approaching our table. Dr. Sarah Anderson? The lead agent was a woman in her 40s with an earpiece and the kind of alert posture that immediately identified her as Secret Service. Yes, I said, aware that every conversation in the reception hall had stopped. Special Agent Martinez, United States Secret Service. Dr. Anderson, the President is ready for your national security briefing. We have secure transportation standing by. The reception hall went completely silent. 50 wedding guests holding plates of cake and glasses of champagne, all staring at the Secret Service agents who had just walked into my reception. National security briefing? Mom's voice came out as a whisper. Dr. Anderson works as a Russia specialist for the National Security Council. Special Agent Martinez explained to the room in general. She provides intelligence analysis and policy recommendations on Eastern European affairs directly to the president and senior administration officials. Dad was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Sarah works for the National Security Council? Senior intelligence analyst, Special Agent Martinez continued. Dr. Anderson's expertise on Russian political and military strategy makes her essential for briefings involving Eastern European security threats. But, Mom said weakly, Sarah said she works for the State Department. I work for the National Security Council, which coordinates with State Department personnel, I said. Most of my work is classified, so I usually just tell people I work in government foreign policy analysis. Michael was looking at me with amazement. Sarah, you never told me you briefed the president. I brief the National Security Advisor who briefs the president. Sometimes I participate in larger briefings when my expertise is specifically needed. Special Agent Martinez checked her watch. Dr. Anderson, we need to depart immediately. The president is waiting for your analysis of the developing situation in Ukraine. Ukraine? And Carol said. Sarah, you work on Ukraine policy? Among other things, I said, gathering my purse. I analyze Russian strategic decision-making and its implications for U.S. foreign policy. Dr. Anderson, Special Agent Martinez continued, addressing the room, is one of the government's leading experts on Russian political psychology and military doctrine. Her analysis influences major foreign policy decisions. The wedding guests were staring at me in complete silence. Michael, I said, I'll be back as soon as possible. Go, he said, standing to kiss me. This is incredible, Sarah. I'm proud of you. As I walked toward the reception hall exit with the Secret Service detail, I could hear Mom saying to Dad, she briefs the president. Our daughter briefs the President of the United States. The motorcade was exactly what you'd expect from a presidential security detail. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, additional security vehicles, and enough firepower to handle any conceivable threat. As we drove through the city toward the White House, Special Agent Martinez briefed me on the situation. Russian military movements near the Ukrainian border have accelerated in the past 6 hours, she explained. The president needs your assessment of whether this represents an imminent invasion threat or strategic positioning for diplomatic leverage. Have we confirmed the specific units involved? I asked, switching into analysis mode. That's part of what you'll be briefing. CIA has satellite intelligence, NSA has communications intercepts, and Defense Intelligence has tactical assessments. Your job is to synthesize the intelligence and provide strategic context. The White House Situation Room was exactly as secure and high-tech as I'd expected, filled with screens displaying real-time intelligence from around the world. The National Security Advisor was there along with senior officials from Defense, State, CIA, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Dr. Anderson, the National Security Advisor said as I entered, thank you for coming in. I know this disrupts your wedding celebration. Not a problem, sir. What's the current intelligence picture? For the next 3 hours I analyzed satellite imagery, communications intercepts, and tactical reports to assess Russian intentions and recommend U.S. policy responses. The situation was complex. Russian military exercises that could either be routine training or preparation for actual military action against Ukraine. Dr. Anderson, the Secretary of Defense said during the briefing, your analysis suggests this is primarily diplomatic signaling rather than invasion preparation? Based on the unit compositions and positioning, yes. The Russians are demonstrating capability without committing to action. This appears designed to influence ongoing diplomatic negotiations rather than prepare for immediate military operations. Your confidence level on that assessment? 75%. The alternative scenario, actual invasion preparation, would require different tactical deployments that we're not seeing in the current intelligence. The president joined us via secure video link for the final hour of the briefing. Dr. Anderson, he said, your analysis has been crucial for our understanding of Russian strategic thinking. How should we respond to this latest demonstration? Mr. President, I recommend measured diplomatic engagement that acknowledges Russian concerns while maintaining firm support for Ukrainian sovereignty. The goal is to de-escalate tensions without appearing to reward threatening behavior. And if your assessment is wrong? If this is actual invasion preparation? Then we'll see additional tactical indicators within the next 48 hours. I recommend maintaining heightened intelligence surveillance and preparing response options while pursuing diplomatic engagement. The briefing concluded at 11:30 p.m. As I rode back to Riverside Gardens, I reflected on the surreal experience of analyzing international crises while wearing my wedding dress. When I returned to the reception hall, I found that most of the guests had stayed, apparently fascinated by the idea of a wedding interrupted by presidential national security briefings. The conversation had completely shifted from Mom's critiques of my wedding choices to amazement about my actual career. "Sarah." Michael approached immediately. "How was the briefing?" "Classified," I said with a smile, "but the situation is stable." "My daughter," Mom said, appearing beside us with tears in her eyes, "briefs the President of the United States on national security issues." "Sometimes, yes. And we've been criticizing your career choices," Dad said, looking embarrassed. "Sarah, I owe you an enormous apology." "Dad, you didn't know what I actually do. Most of my work is classified." "But we should have asked better questions," Mom said. "We should have tried to understand your work instead of assuming it was unimportant." Jennifer approached our group. "Sarah, my cousin works for the National Security Council and gets picked up by the Secret Service during her wedding reception. This is the most amazing family story ever." "The most amazing career," Aunt Carol corrected. "Sarah is literally helping to shape foreign policy." As the reception finally wound down around midnight, Mom pulled me aside. "Sarah, I need to apologize for everything I said earlier tonight." "Mom, you were disappointed about the wedding reception." "I understand." "No, you don't understand. I was embarrassed by what I thought were modest choices that reflected poorly on our family's status. Now I realize you made thoughtful choices about what mattered to you while managing one of the most important jobs in government." "The wedding was perfect," I said. "Michael and I got to celebrate with the people we care about most, including Secret Service agents who interrupted to brief you on international crises," Mom said with amazement. "That part wasn't planned," I admitted. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy? With your career, your marriage, the choices you've made?" I looked around the reception hall where Michael was saying goodbye to his family, where my friends from graduate school were discussing international relations with newfound respect, where my parents were finally understanding the work I'd been doing for years. "Mom, I wake up every morning knowing that my analysis helps protect American interests and potentially prevents international conflicts. I married someone who supports my career and understands the importance of public service. I couldn't be happier. Even though we criticized your choices? Especially because you were willing to change your minds when you learned the full picture." 6 months later, my analysis of Russian strategic intentions proved accurate. The military exercises were indeed diplomatic signaling, and tensions de-escalated through careful negotiation. Mom kept a framed photo of me being escorted by Secret Service agents on her mantelpiece, apparently as proud of that moment as she was embarrassed by her earlier criticism. At our first anniversary dinner, Michael raised his champagne glass. "To Sarah, who turned our wedding reception into a national security briefing and somehow made it the most memorable celebration possible. To families who learned to understand each other," I replied. "And to marriages strong enough to survive presidential emergencies," Mom added, joining our toast. Looking back on that day, I realized that the best weddings aren't necessarily the most expensive or elaborate. They're the ones where you learn something important about the people you love, and they learn something important about you, even if it takes the Secret Service showing up to make that learning possible. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Saturday night in October. I knew it was bad news before I even looked at the caller ID. Nobody calls at that hour with good news. "Miss Chin." The voice was professional, controlled. "This is Officer Martinez with the Metro Police Department. Are you the owner of a 2021 Audi A4? License plate number came 847. My stomach dropped. I'd bought that car 6 months ago after 3 years of saving every overtime dollar, every bonus, every tax refund. It was the first truly nice thing I'd ever owned, and I'd been so careful with it that I still had the plastic protector on the floor mats. Yes, that's my car. What happened? The vehicle was involved in a single-car collision at approximately 2:15 a.m. The driver hit a utility pole on Riverside Drive. He's been taken to Memorial Hospital. The driver, My heart stopped. I'd lent the car to my brother Jake for what was supposed to be a quick dinner with friends. Is he okay? He's conscious and stable. However, I need to inform you that alcohol appears to be a factor in the collision. We'll need you to come to the scene to discuss the vehicle. I threw on clothes and drove to Riverside Drive, my hands shaking on the steering wheel of my old Honda Civic, the car I'd kept as backup transportation. When I arrived, I couldn't process what I was seeing. My beautiful silver Audi was wrapped around a telephone pole like a piece of crumpled paper. The front end was completely destroyed, the roof caved in on the driver's side, and there was glass and metal debris scattered across 50 feet of asphalt. Officer Martinez walked over as I stood there staring at the wreckage. Miss Chin, I'm sorry about your vehicle. Is there any chance it can be repaired? He looked at the twisted metal that used to be my car. Ma'am, I'm honestly surprised the driver survived. This was a high-speed collision. I felt nauseous. How fast was he going? Based on the damage and skid marks, we estimate around 65 miles per hour in a 35 zone. 65 in a 35. Jake had been driving my car nearly twice the speed limit while drunk. What happens now? We're investigating the crash. Your brother will be cited for DUI, reckless driving, and several other charges. Since this is his second DUI in 3 years, he's looking at serious consequences. Second DUI. I hadn't known about the first one. What about the car? You'll need to contact your insurance company. The vehicle will be towed to the impound lot once we finish processing the scene. I spent the rest of the night at the hospital, waiting for news about Jake's condition. He had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured wrist, but the doctors said he'd recover fully. When he was finally coherent enough to talk, his first words weren't an apology. Megan, thank God you're here. This is such a nightmare. I don't remember anything after leaving the restaurant. You were drunk, Jake. You crashed my car. I wasn't drunk. I had maybe 2 beers with dinner. I stared at him. The police said your blood alcohol was 0.14. That's nearly twice the legal limit. That can't be right. Those tests are wrong all the time. Even lying in a hospital bed with evidence of his drunk driving literally surrounding us, Jake was denying responsibility. My car is totaled, I said quietly. Insurance will cover it, right? It'll be fine. Jake, you could have killed someone. You could have killed yourself. But I didn't. It was just an accident. Just an accident. As if driving drunk at 65 miles per hour through a residential neighborhood was some unavoidable act of nature. I left the hospital without saying another word to him. Sunday afternoon, I was at my apartment trying to deal with insurance claims and police reports when my parents showed up unannounced. Megan, we need to talk about this situation with Jake, Mom said the moment I opened the door. What situation? You mean the situation where he stole my car and totaled it while driving drunk? He didn't steal your car, Dad said firmly. You gave him permission to borrow it. I gave him permission to drive to dinner and back. Not to go bar hopping and drive drunk at twice the speed limit. Mom settled onto my couch with the air of someone preparing to deliver a lecture. Jake made a mistake. A serious mistake. But he's family and family forgives family. He could have killed someone. But he didn't, Dad said. He's alive, no one else was hurt, and insurance will replace your car. Everything worked out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything worked out. My car is destroyed. Jake is facing criminal charges, and he could have killed an innocent person. Don't be so dramatic, Mom said. Accidents happen. Jake feels terrible about this. Is he? Because when I talked to him at the hospital, he denied being drunk and called it just an accident. He's in shock, Dad explained. People say things they don't mean when they're traumatized. He's in shock? What about me? I worked 3 years to save for that car. Mom reached over and patted my hand condescendingly. And you'll work to save for another one. You're young, you have a good job, you'll bounce back. Jake's the one who could go to jail. Maybe he should go to jail. The room went dead silent. Megan, Mom said, her voice sharp with disapproval, that's a terrible thing to say about your brother. It's a terrible thing he did. This is his second DUI. He's lucky he didn't kill anyone. Second DUI? Dad looked confused. You didn't know? Jake got his first DUI 2 years ago. Apparently he never told you. My parents exchanged glances. That doesn't change anything, Mom said finally. He's still your brother and he still needs our support right now. What about my support? What about the fact that I just lost $45,000 because Jake decided to drive drunk in my car? The insurance will cover it, Dad said dismissively. Insurance doesn't cover the full value. I'll be lucky to get $35,000 and I still owe $38,000 on the loan. I'm going to end up paying for a car that doesn't exist anymore. That's not Jake's fault, Mom said. That's just how insurance works. I stared at her. It's absolutely Jake's fault. If he hadn't driven drunk, my car wouldn't be wrapped around a telephone pole. Look, Dad said using his reasonable parent voice, we understand you're upset. But Jake is going through enough right now without having to worry about family drama too. Family drama? This anger you're carrying. It's not healthy and it's not helping anyone. I'm not angry because I enjoy being angry. I'm angry because my brother destroyed my car while committing a felony. It was an accident. Driving drunk is not an accident. It's a choice. Mom stood up, clearly frustrated with my refusal to be reasonable. Megan, we came here hoping you'd be more mature about this. Jake needs to know his family supports him. Have you asked Jake if he's planning to support me? Like maybe help with the insurance shortfall or the fact that I now need to buy another car. Jake doesn't have that kind of money, Dad said. Jake had money for bar tabs. That's different. How is it different? Because. Dad struggled for a moment. Because Jake's going through a difficult time right now. He's been stressed about work and sometimes people make poor decisions when they're under pressure. So his stress justifies destroying my car? It explains it, Mom said. And as his family we need to show understanding and compassion. I looked at my parents, two people who had driven across town not to check on my well-being after losing my car, but to make sure I wasn't being too hard on the person who had destroyed it. Did either of you ask Jake to apologize to me? They were quiet. Did you suggest he take responsibility for the financial damage he caused? More silence. Did you even express disappointment in his behavior? Or did you just focus on making sure I don't hold him accountable? Megan, Mom said softly, we're trying to keep this family together. By asking me to pretend that what Jake did was okay? By asking you to forgive your brother and move forward. I can forgive Jake and still expect him to face consequences for his actions. What consequences? Dad asked. He's already been through a terrible car accident. He's hurt, he's facing legal problems. Hasn't he suffered enough? He's facing legal problems because he committed crimes. And I'm facing financial problems because of his choices. The financial problems are temporary, Mom said. Jake's legal problems could follow him for years. I realized something in that moment. My parents weren't just asking me to forgive Jake. They were asking me to pretend his drunk driving was my problem to solve, my loss to absorb, my responsibility to minimize. You know what? I said, standing up. You're right. Jake has suffered enough. My parents looked relieved. I'll make sure he doesn't have to suffer any more consequences for his actions. That's very mature of you, Dad said approvingly. I already called the police and filed a report about the unauthorized use of my vehicle. The relief on their faces turned to confusion. What does that mean? Mom asked. It means I've documented that Jake took my car without permission to go drinking, drove it while intoxicated and destroyed it through reckless driving. But you gave him permission. I gave him permission to drive to dinner and back. I didn't give him permission to go bar hopping or drive drunk. The police report reflects the actual facts of what happened. Dad's face was getting red. Megan, that's going to make Jake's legal situation much worse. Jake's choices made his legal situation worse. I just made sure there was an accurate record of what those choices were. You filed a police report against your own brother? Mom asked like I'd committed an unthinkable betrayal. I filed a police report about my stolen and destroyed vehicle. The fact that my brother was the one who stole and destroyed it is unfortunate, but it doesn't change the facts. This is vindictive, Dad said angrily. You're trying to get revenge on Jake because you're angry about your car. I'm trying to make sure the person responsible for destroying my car is held accountable for destroying my car. That's not revenge, that's justice. Justice. Mom practically spat the word. This is your brother we're talking about. And I'm your daughter. But apparently my financial well-being matters less than Jake's legal comfort. They tried arguing with me for another 20 minutes, alternating between guilt trips, accusations of vindictiveness, and lectures about family loyalty. Nothing they said changed my mind. As they were leaving, Mom turned back with one final attempt at manipulation. When Jake goes to prison because of your police report, I hope you can live with that. When Jake goes to prison, it'll be because he drove drunk and destroyed property, not because I documented what he did. They left and I didn't hear from anyone in my family for a week. During that week, I learned several interesting things from the police detective handling Jake's case. First, this wasn't Jake's second DUI. It was his third. He'd had one in college that my parents had quietly handled, one 2 years ago that he'd kept secret, and now this one. Second, Jake had been at 3 different bars that night, not just dinner with friends, like he'd told me. Security footage showed him visibly intoxicated at the last location before he got in my car. Third, Jake had been texting while driving in the moments before the crash. The police had recovered his phone and found messages he'd sent to friends bragging about driving his sister's fancy car. None of this surprised me, but it confirmed what I'd suspected. Jake's version of events was complete fiction. The surprise came the following Sunday when my parents invited me to family dinner, to work things out. I arrived at their house to find not just Mom, Dad, and Jake, but also my Aunt Susan, Uncle Bob, and my grandparents. It was clearly an intervention designed to pressure me into dropping the charges against Jake. Jake was sitting at the dining room table with his arm in a cast, looking appropriately sorry for himself. He gave me a weak smile when I walked in. "Megan, I'm so glad you came," Mom said, her tone artificially warm. "We're all here because we love both you and Jake and we want to find a way to heal this family." I took a seat across from Jake, noting that no one had asked how I was dealing with the loss of my car or the financial stress of the insurance situation. "Jake has something he wants to say to you," Dad announced. Jake looked up at me with what he probably thought was a sincere expression. "Megan, I'm really sorry about your car. I know how much it meant to you." "Thank you," I said. "And I want to make it right. Once my legal situation is resolved and I can get back to work, I'll help you with whatever the insurance doesn't cover." Several family members nodded approvingly at this generous offer. "How much do you think that will be?" I asked. "I don't know. A few $1,000s. Try 10,000. Maybe more." Jake's face fell. "Well, I'll do whatever I can. It might take a while." "How long?" "I don't know. A few years maybe." Aunt Susan jumped in. "The important thing is that Jake is taking responsibility and offering to make amends." "Is he taking responsibility for driving drunk?" The table went quiet. "Jake made a mistake," Mom started. "Jake made a choice," I corrected. 3 times. This is his third DUI. Several family members looked shocked. Apparently, Jake had been more successful at hiding his drinking problem than I'd realized. "That's not what we're here to discuss," Dad said firmly. "We're here to discuss moving forward as a family." "Moving forward how?" Grandpa spoke up for the first time. "Your grandmother and I think you should drop this police report business. Jake's learned his lesson." "What lesson has he learned?" "That drinking and driving is dangerous," Grandma said. "He learned that lesson twice before. It didn't stop him from doing it again." "This time was different," Jake said. "This time I really understand how serious it could have been." "What's different about it?" "I could have been killed. You could have killed someone else. In fact, if there had been another car on Riverside Drive or if someone had been walking their dog, you probably would have killed them. But that didn't happen," Mom said quickly. "Because Jake got lucky. Not because he was being responsible." Uncle Bob decided to try a different approach. "Megan, we all understand you're angry. But think about Jake's future. A felony conviction could ruin his career. Jake's choices could have ruined someone's life. Permanently. But they didn't," Jake said. "And I promise it'll never happen again." I looked around the table at these people who were so focused on protecting Jake from consequences that they couldn't see how dangerous his behavior had become. "Jake, how many times have you driven drunk that you didn't get caught?" "What do you mean?" "I mean this is your third DUI, but I'm guessing it's not your third time driving drunk. How many times did you get away with it?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "You don't remember driving drunk any other times?" Jake's face flushed. "Sometimes people have a drink or two and still drive. That's not the same thing as drunk driving." "Actually, it literally is the same thing." "Megan, Mom said sharply. Stop attacking your brother. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm trying to understand how we got to the point where Jake thought it was okay to take my car and drive drunk in it. He didn't think it was okay, Dad said. He made an error in judgment. 3 times. This isn't helping anyone, Aunt Susan said. What's done is done. The question is, how do we move forward? We move forward by Jake facing the consequences of his actions and getting the help he needs to stop driving drunk. He doesn't need help, Mom said. He just needs family support. He needs both. And part of facing consequences is dealing with the legal system without his family interfering. The room erupted in protests. Everyone started talking at once about family loyalty, forgiveness, and the importance of supporting each other during difficult times. I waited for them to quiet down, then stood up. I can see this dinner isn't actually about healing the family, I said. It's about pressuring me to protect Jake from the consequences of his actions. That's not true, Grandpa said. Really? Did anyone here suggest that Jake needs professional help for his drinking problem? Silence. Did anyone suggest that he should voluntarily surrender his license until he proves he can be trusted not to drive drunk? More silence. Did anyone even acknowledge that he could have killed innocent people? Megan, Mom said, her voice pleading. He's your brother. And I'm your daughter. But apparently his comfort matters more than my safety or my financial security. I headed for the door, then turned back. Just so you know, the police report I filed isn't what's going to get Jake in trouble. His blood alcohol level, the excessive speed, the property damage, and his prior convictions are what's going to get him in trouble. But your report makes it worse, Dad said. My report makes it accurate. As I reached the door, Jake called out, Megan, wait. I stopped. What do you want from me? What would make you happy? I turned around to look at him, really look at him. He was 28 years old, sitting in my parents' dining room with his extended family rallying around to protect him from accountability. He just destroyed my car while driving drunk, and his biggest concern was whether I was going to make his legal problems worse. I want you to stop driving drunk, I said. I want you to get help for your drinking problem. And I want you to take full responsibility for what you did to my car. I am taking responsibility. I said I'd pay you back. You said you'd help with whatever insurance doesn't cover, maybe in a few years if you can. That's not taking responsibility. That's offering to help with the consequences of taking responsibility. What else can I do? You can stop asking me to lie to the police about what happened. Jake looked genuinely confused. I never asked you to lie. Everyone in this room is asking me to lie. You're asking me to pretend you had permission to take my car drinking. You're asking me to pretend this was an unavoidable accident instead of the predictable result of drunk driving. You're asking me to minimize your choices so you face fewer consequences for making them. I looked around the room one more time. The police report stays. Jake will face whatever consequences the legal system determines are appropriate. And I will not be covering any of the financial damage his choices caused. I left them sitting there and drove home in my old Honda Civic, feeling lighter than I had since the night my phone rang at 2:47 a.m. 3 weeks later, the police officers showed up during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I wasn't there. I'd stopped attending family dinners after the intervention, but Jake called me afterward, panicked and angry. Did you know they were going to arrest me at dinner? He demanded. Who arrested you? The police. They came to Mom and Dad's house with handcuffs. Jake, I didn't know when they were going to arrest you. I just knew they were going to arrest you. This is your fault. If you hadn't filed that police report. If you hadn't driven drunk, there wouldn't have been a police report to file. Everyone saw me get arrested. Mom was crying, Dad was yelling at the officers, and the neighbors came out to see what was happening. I'm sorry, that was embarrassing for everyone. Are you? Because it seems like you wanted this to happen. I wanted you to face appropriate consequences for driving drunk and destroying my car. How those consequences were delivered wasn't up to me. Jake was quiet for a moment. The lawyer says I'm probably going to jail because of your police report. The lawyer's wrong. You're probably going to jail because this is your 3rd DUI and you caused significant property damage while driving at dangerous speeds. But your report made it worse. My report made it honest. Jake hung up on me. The trial happened 4 months later. I testified about the circumstances under which Jake had borrowed my car and the extent of the damage he'd caused. I didn't embellish anything, but I also didn't minimize anything. Jake was convicted of DUI, reckless driving, and unauthorized use of a vehicle. He received 18 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and was required to complete alcohol counseling and community service. He was also ordered to pay restitution for the full value of my car. My family was furious with me. According to them, I had destroyed Jake's life by telling the truth about what he'd done. But something interesting happened during the months after Jake's sentencing. Other family members started reaching out to me privately. My cousin Lisa called to tell me that Jake had driven drunk with her kids in the car 2 years earlier, but she'd been too afraid of family backlash to say anything. Uncle Bob admitted that he'd suspected Jake had a serious drinking problem for years but hadn't wanted to create family drama by bringing it up. Even my grandmother eventually acknowledged that maybe jail would force Jake to get the help he needed. Jake served 14 months of his 18-month sentence. He was released early for good behavior and completion of the prison's alcohol treatment program. The first call I got from him after his release was different from any conversation we'd had before. "Megan, I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "Okay. Not just for crashing your car. For everything. For lying about what happened, for letting Mom and Dad pressure you to drop the charges, for never taking responsibility for any of it. Thank you." The counselor in prison helped me understand something. She said that family members who protect addicts from consequences aren't helping them, they're enabling them. I was quiet, not sure where this was going. She said, "You were the only person in our family who actually tried to help me by letting me face the consequences of my actions. How do you feel about that now?" "Honestly, I'm grateful. I'm sober for the first time in 8 years. I'm in AA, and I have a job that doesn't involve driving. None of that would have happened if you'd let Mom and Dad convince you to drop the charges." "What about the restitution?" "I'm paying you back $50 a week. It's going to take a long time, but I'll pay every penny." And he has. Jake has been making payments consistently for 2 years now. He's also been sober for 2 years, attends AA meetings regularly, and has rebuilt his relationship with honesty and accountability. My parents have slowly come around to understanding that protecting Jake from consequences was actually hurting him. They still think I was too harsh, but they acknowledge that Jake needed professional help that family support alone couldn't provide. The insurance settlement did end up short, just like I'd predicted. I lost about $12,000 on the car, which Jake's restitution payments are slowly covering. But more importantly, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when everyone else is pressuring you to protect them from accountability. Jake could have killed someone that night. If my police report contributed to consequences that prevented him from driving drunk again, then it was worth every uncomfortable family dinner and angry phone call. Sometimes saving someone means letting them hit rock bottom instead of providing a soft landing that allows them to keep making dangerous choices. Family doesn't mean protecting each other from consequences. It means caring enough about each other to insist on accountability, even when accountability is painful.